All right, Jonathan. The discussion for tonight: calories in and calories out. This is, I guess, something that I've wanted to chime in for quite some time now, and I wanted to get your thoughts around this. So I'll let you take the mic on this and tell us what you think about the notion of calories in and calories out.
Sure, yeah. So, what we've basically talked about a lot in the past on my channel and some other channels as well is the idea that calorie counting isn't the most appropriate tool to track or measure food nutrient intake, at least the value of it once it's hit our body, our digestive system, so to speak.
Mm.
I have issues with calorie counting for a number of reasons. I've got the definition to hand right here, which I'll confess to. It says
Mm.
a unit of energy equivalent to the heat energy needed to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degrees Celsius. What that basically means is a calorie is defined in a closed thermodynamic system. In the case of a human body, we are not a closed thermodynamic system. We can't isolate us because we react with our environment. We have hormones, digestive capacities, enzymatic rates. Reactions happen with our body which affect the energy that we can take in or not take in from the food that we ingest. So, for that reason, very broadly speaking, it doesn't really work. Now, the calories were formulated in what I just mentioned was a closed thermodynamic system. So, they basically heated up food and saw what happens in this,
Mm.
like a capsule sort of thing, in what's called a bomb calorimeter. But what we know about that is it doesn't translate well to what happens in human beings. Well, people will say, yes, but I reduced my calories by 1,000 each day and I lost weight. Yes, by default, you would have had to reduce your food intake by some measurement to some degree
Mm.
to take in less calories. But the problem I have with that is it's not a good or valid measurement.
No.
There's a few reasons why, which I'll go into. So the first reason is that most places, specifically in the Western world, they have legislation which allows for a 20% margin of error, plus or minus, in terms of the calorie amount that can be labelled as what is contained within food. So there's a 40% margin of error. So if, for example,
Wow.
Joff, you were looking at a McDonald's meal or something like that, and it said,
Yeah.
okay, this is 1,000 calorie meal, it could have 800 calories or it could have 1,200 calories. So there it's false straight away. It goes way off what is a margin that I'd say was fair or scientifically valid, so to speak. The other thing as well is when we ingest those foods, they do actually have different macronutrient amounts. So, for example, 1,000 calories of Pop Tarts would not equate to the same body composition changes as 1,000 calories of chicken breast, for example. A different reaction would happen in our body. We'd probably know that we'd get leaner, gain more muscle just eating the chicken breast versus the Pop Tarts. That's quite obvious. So people that are willing to accept that, by default, they cannot accept that calories is a good metric. Now people
Right.
say, yeah, but I've done it and I've reduced my calories or increased my calories by this amount. What the people typically say is over a 7 day period, you have to decrease your calories by 500 grams per day below baseline to lose a pound of body fat. I have some issues with this, mostly anecdotally, from what I see with people that I speak to online, and also the fact that our metabolisms do vary from day to day. So
Mm.
it is an idea that we have to use a what they called a total daily effective energy expenditure calculator online, and it'll give you a very rough rudimentary ballpark figure of how much calories we will be burning or
Mm.
oxidizing each day. But again, it's not accurate at all. I'll give an example here based on my experience. So when I competed in 2018, I was
Mm.
not a carnivore at this point, and I got down as low as 2,600 calories per day. At that point, I was going for a competition and I did get in shape, so it did work. Later in 2021, I used a carnivore diet to get in contest shape. The same conditioning as before, so I wasn't less ripped or more ripped, just the same pretty much. However, I was eating more food, so therefore my calorie intake was much higher. So the lowest calorie intake that I had in 2021 was 3,600. The only difference in this time was I was actually training more in the gym and eating less in 2018. So what does that tell you
Right.
about our metabolisms and how adaptive they are? There's certainly a hormonal element that comes into play, which is
Right.
what
Right.
people call the carbohydrate insulin model.
Yeah.
Now, before I get into that, my proposal to people, if you're going to track intake, is that the best way to track your food intake is, ironically, to track your food intake. So this means the person watching this video, if you know, for example, your goal is to gain a few pounds of muscle mass, you're going to need to increase your intake to some degree. So that might be through protein or fat or a combination of both. To do that, if you're going to be eating, say, 500 grams of ground beef each day, which is 80/20 maybe, quite a fatty sort of minced beef, you might have that with 6 eggs and 2 ounces of butter. That's usually the sort of idea, the example I use. So about 56 grams of butter. What you'll notice is if you increase that food amount by, say, 50 grams of meat, an extra egg, and an extra ounce of butter, you'll gain weight. There are examples where people's metabolic rates are down-regulated. So therefore, when they increase the food intake that they have, they will actually up-regulate their metabolism and actually can, in some cases, lose weight.
Yeah.
But that's only in the case where someone is metabolically damaged to a point where their metabolic rate is lower. So, for example, what we know about people which have a slow metabolism is they'll breathe slower, they'll be less fidgety, they'll be more tired, they'll be very lackadaisical about life, they won't walk as much, they'll find ways to make life easier because their metabolism is lower. So it kind of makes sense. Your body's trying to save itself, it's trying to prevent itself from going into a detrimental state of constant deficit. So
Right.
our metabolic rate can adapt. So what I say to most people, like I just said, was increase or decrease food intake grams. So the actual food that you're eating, eggs, beef, cheese, butter, whatever it happens to be. The next best method, which I call the mass balance model. So I did not invent this, I did not create this. But it does stand true to what I know about bodybuilding and what I've always thought. So I'll kind of lay it out this way. So the mass balance model is effectively mass in versus mass out. So what they've actually found was when you measure the food intake that we have in terms of macronutrient grams, so for example, 200 grams of protein with 200 grams of fat per day, then you compare that to a measurement which is calories basically, but you try and equate the food amounts the same in terms of the macronutrients. What you'll find is the mass of food that you take in will be a better determinant and predictor of your body composition and weight. So, of course, Pop-Tart diet versus a ground beef diet, you're going to get vastly different results, even though the calories might be equated. So that's why I say to people, protein and fat grams, measure those out, see where you're at. Then if you throw carbohydrates into mix, this is the next point I want to get to. So this is the next thing which I think does make an impact. And based on my speculation and experience, and also Professor Bart Kay, he didn't say this, but he did agree with me. So for what it's worth, 80% of the weight we lose or gain is based on the mass balance model. So food in, food out.
Yeah.
Grams in, grams out, so to speak.
Yes.
The next best method, which I'm just going to say is, well, the next best thing which is plays part in it, it plays a key role, is the carbohydrate insulin model. So the idea here is we have blood glucose which circulates, which requires an amount of insulin in order for us to store that blood glucose and utilize it effectively and do different reactions about the body. However, that's only about 20% of the mass balance, the actual weight gain or weight loss I just explained.
Right.
So
Right.
it's not a case of measure this or measure that. It's first look at your macros, adjust them. If there is an issue, so I've spoken to people before, they've not lost weight because they've consumed 300 plus grams of protein per day. So that tells me they're probably wasting a lot. converting a lot of it through gluconeogenesis into glucose. Therefore, they're having blood sugar crashes. Therefore, there's more glycation. Therefore, there's more insulin. Therefore, their storage hormones are higher.
Yes.
Thus, they're less able to lose body fat.
Yes.
So that's basically it in a nutshell for calories in, calories out. I'm sure you've got some questions around that though, so please feel free to ask.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that. I appreciate that really detailed explanation that you've provided. Now, I wanted to go back a little bit now with from how I perceive things to be is that the calories in, calories out model is basically an oversimplification of a much bigger, I guess, system that we actually have to take into account. I mean, the human body, like as you mentioned, doesn't work as a um, we're not a closed how did you say it? A closed system.
Not a closed
You know,
system, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
we're not a closed system. We're an open system, and we've got quite complex processes in order to you know to achieve our body composition and whatnot. So yeah, I just find it very interesting, and there's not so much of a question, but would you agree that this statement would be correct? Is that the calories in, calories out model is, um, it's inapplicable to human beings when it comes to body weight composition? Do you agree on that at some level?
Yeah, yeah, I think what I will say is it is a measurement.
Yes.
It's not the best measurement, and I don't think it's the right measurement. I
Yes.
think the problem is people will look at calories in a very simplistic fashion and say, okay, this bag of chips has 100 calories. This chicken breast has 100 calories.
Hmm.
They'll think it's the same. The problem as well is when we look at processed foods, this is why I think they started to bring calories more into the picture and start talking about it more.
Hmm. Right.
If we measure the nutrient grams of beef, eggs, dairy, we know pretty much it's going to be near enough the same amount every time, especially when we're
Right.
buying it in the ways that we do. A ribeye steak tends to be, for example, 2 to 1 in terms of fat to protein grams,
Hmm.
roughly, or is it? Or in terms of calories anyway. So it's about one
Yeah.
to one, which works out 66% fat, 33% protein.
Yes.
However, the thing is they want to look at calories because they're more applicable to processed foods. I mean, if you
Yes.
got, say, for example, a protein bar, it's a keto bar, whatever, and say it's
Yeah.
got whey protein, soy protein isolate, soy lecithin, glucose, syrups, peanut butter, artificial sweeteners, salt, all these different ingredients which make up that protein bar. How are you going to accurately measure what's in it and say, right, whey is 4 grams of protein, soy is 2 grams, this is this. You got so many numbers to pick apart. Therefore,
Yeah.
it's easy if the food manufacturer just put on the label
Yeah.
200
Just put the
calories.
number. Yeah.
It's more simple for people to understand.
Right. Right.
But it doesn't equate to the food that we take in terms of the nutritive value. The other thing I will mention as well, which I didn't explain properly in the first part, was using calories as a measurement for food intake is like it's like putting chocolate milk into our car.
Yeah.
It's not the correct substrate or the correct currency.
Yes. Yeah.
We take in food, B vitamins catalyze reactions, which turn the food into eventually ATP downstream in the mitochondria.
Yes. Yes.
So ATP is our currency of energy in and out. That then forms waste products, which we exhale, excrete, get rid of, oxidize. Downstream something happens to them. That's where the weight loss comes. The weight loss doesn't come from burning, which is what happens to calories.
Yes.
You see
Yes.
what I mean? So the
Yeah.
measurement
Yeah.
has to be accurate. The currency has to be accurate. I'm saying that if we're eating a species appropriate diet, which is the carnivore diet, then we don't need to look at calories. It doesn't come into it because you're
No.
eating 6 eggs, 500 grams of beef, 2 ounces of butter, 2 ounces of
Yes.
cheddar cheese. Do you see what I mean? So you're measuring food.
Yeah.
So why
Yeah.
would someone look at calories when you have a better measurement right there in front of us?
And not necessarily the macronutrient makeup as well, right? Are you do you agree with that? Like, as a carnivore, you're not going to measure out, how much fat, accurately try to measure out how much fat is in, the marbling of your ribeye steak.
Yeah.
So yeah,
The food system has complicated it for us a lot.
yeah,
The reason why I say this is we should be eating, in my opinion, people may disagree or agree,
yeah,
about 5 to 10 foods, somewhere around there. I think 10 is perhaps on the excessive side and 5 might be on the minimalist side. So also depends what your genetic heritage is, things you can or cannot tolerate. I'm a white gentleman from northwest of Europe in England, so I can tolerate dairy better than other people, and I seem to thrive better on a diet with more omega-3 than most people. But then people like yourself, Joff, you wouldn't have the same genetic heritage as me. Therefore, your ancestral historical diet would be different to mine. So you might thrive on a different composition of food makeup, basically.
right,
So that's what we're looking at here, food. And yeah, the calories thing, it's people want to believe it's true because they don't want to eat whole
yes,
food.
yeah,
Once you get onto whole food, it becomes a lot more sensible to measure things. So like I keep saying, you measure your food intake. Failing that, you measure your macronutrient intake. Failing that, you use your palm, for example. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not gonna misestimate the size of my palm by forty
yeah,
percent.
yeah, yeah,
If I put my palm on the chicken breast, for example, I could say, oh, yeah, it's about the same size as my palm. So I'll say, okay, I know from this reference value it weighs 100 grams or something, whatever it works out to be.
mm,
You're not going to misestimate the size of your palm by 40%.
yes, yes,
So therefore, it is a better measurement for food intake than measuring calories if you're looking at whole food forms. So yeah, then the last method is the calories in, calories out, which is so loose and so weak. So that's kind of where I stand. So it's not a case of it doesn't work for some people. Yeah, it gives people a loose indication of what they're eating, but there are better
mm,
methods out there that people can use that are accessible and are perhaps easier to measure. So that's my argument.
yes, yeah. And so, just based on, from my experience, and when I started to learn more about the arguments uh, against calories in, calories out, and I started getting a bit active about it in social media and my own personal platform. I received so much flack from people in the fitness space, and no matter how much I tried to explain to them, exactly the points that you've brought up, uh, people defend it to you know to the end, and
We know
it's
what that
very
is,
hard
Joff.
to you-
We know what
tell me
this
what
is.
come on.
Joff, you're a very polite gentleman, as am I for the most part. But the thing is, people don't want to be called out when they're wrong. That's one reason.
Yeah,
And the other part is, oftentimes these people have produced programs, ebooks, coaching plans, articles, blogs, website pages, all these things, which
yeah,
promote calories in, calories out. So for them to admit that they're wrong, they lose all credibility.
yeah.
So that's why they're doing it.
Have you ever received any I guess backlash from others?
All my videos, Joff, on calories in, calories out and
Yeah.
debunking it, they all get a proportionate amount of dislikes at times. So,
Right, right.
but people do like to disagree with me, which is fine. I'm open to discussion, but
Yeah, yeah,
if I point people to videos like this, I've made like 5 or 6 now at this point. If they've
yeah,
watched all those videos and they still don't understand, I'm lost. I can't help them.
yeah. That's right. Yeah.
There's only so much you can teach someone. So leading a horse to
And
water, isn't it?
well, that's right. That's right. I'm not. I don't know if you touched on this yet, but the calories out as well. I mean, the inaccuracies with trying to measure, your calories intake. Like just trying to measure calories is quite difficult as it is, even with food labels, given the 20% variances that they can have. But measuring the calories out as well of someone, that's another. ballpark itself, I mean, you're going to have to also measure. Uh, I know that there are, um, sort of calculators out there that can measure, can sort of give an estimate about what your activity levels are. But again, that's another estimate as well. So that's another estimate that you've got to throw into the equation, which is,
Yeah.
um, yeah, yeah.
You're
Sorry,
quite
go on.
right. There's the in and out part of it. So we've spoken obviously about the in part. Now,
Yeah,
people don't still understand or value what I've said about the in part. We could talk about the out part. So
yeah,
a little anecdote I'll give you on this. I've used all these calculators in the past. I've tried it all. That's what I've done for the majority of the last 15 years. I've manipulated my body composition. I've gained fat, lost fat, gained muscle, lost muscle. I've done all sorts of things.
mm,
If I use a calorie expenditure chart thing or whatever, and I'll
mm,
even use my phone to measure my step count, body fat,
yeah,
muscle weight, all these metrics that I can have on hand. I'll put these things all into a chart. All these things: step count, heart rate. I've worn the watches before and all those sort of things.
yes,
I found they don't equate to the amount of weight that I've gained or lost, even if I go by the calories thing.
right,
So one of the things was saying to me to eat, I think it was 2,600 calories per day to lose a pound a week. If I did that right now, I'd lose about 6 pounds in a week. So that's extremely
yeah,
inaccurate.
yeah.
Well, it's not valid.
It's
It's not useful. It's not
no,
reliable. And by
no,
scientific measure, it's not. We can't be completely accurate. I think to be completely accurate of any of these things, we have to measure our food through assay analysis, measure
yes,
our
yes,
expenditure through a closed metabolic ward setting.
mm,
If we're doing that, fine. But the chances are most people don't have access to that and not going to spend all
no,
day locked in hospital somewhere. So we have to use our best approximation. So what we have in science is called a hierarchy of evidence.
mm,
The hierarchy of evidence as it stands does show what I am advocating and what you are advocating. So the mass balance model. That's
yes,
the best evidence we have. That it's the same with it's like comparing epidemiology versus a randomized clinical trial.
yes,
They yield vastly different results. One is valid and useful to some people in the scope of the study, but the other
mm,
one isn't useful. It gives an indication to what might be useful to study, but it doesn't tell you about outcomes or risk factors or problems like
no,
that. It just gives you an indication of what might be true or association.
mm, 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 right. Another thing as well is one of the my biffs about the calories in calories out model as well is that um, the one thing that I think it promotes, especially in the fitness industry, is that you can basically eat whatever you want to eat as long as you maintain your whatever your your if you're eating at a meeting your calories or tracking it at a point where you're below your caloric intake or your I forgot the word I'm looking for. It's that late at night. I'm forgetting the the middle ground of what your baseline of calories are.
Yeah.
Just as long as you eat, within those limits, then you're fine. And it's flooded everywhere. You see it in social media. You know, bodybuilders, powerlifters, people promoting, themselves eating, burgers and chips and chocolates and whatnot. And you can achieve this, perfect body just by eating the way I do. So with the mass balance model, because it's not that, it's not definitely not popularized. I mean, I've never heard of it until a few weeks ago. Um, do you think it holds the same sort of, I guess, does it promote the same image as well, that you could just eat whatever you want to eat? And
No, no, the mass balance model reflects on the amount of food that you eat. So if you eat too much
yeah,
food, you'll get fat. If you eat too little food, you'll get thin.
yeah,
Then the variance of the macronutrients that the mass is composed of will affect your body composition to each degree depending on what you're trying to achieve. And one point we'll say about what you said regarding the fitness industry. Most fitness influencers have eating disorders, binge eating in
right,
particular. I know this because I've been amongst these people. I've been to probably close to 15 exhibitions for fitness over the last decade or so. When you walk around these places, most supplement companies, nutrition companies, shops, whatever, they're promoting junk food.
Yeah.
They're labeling it as protein bar, protein cupcake. It's protein with heaps of sugar, heaps of seed oils, no natural products, artificial everything. And they're saying it's food, which I have a problem with. It's not food. It's sourced from food components, which tend to be not ideal. But then they're processed in such a way to minimize nutrient content, but still produce on a food label the macronutrient outcome that the nutrition company is trying to produce or provide. They're still trying to promote junk food. So when I
Yeah.
see healthy, anything really, anything you think about, so healthy shake, healthy bar, it's a processed food at the end of the day, which means it is junk. It's not an optimal food substrate. So
Yeah.
I say this because the amount of times I've seen like tiny little 4'10" bikini women backstage.
Yeah.
They just got off on stage and they've gone from 30% body fat to 20%. So they're not even that lean. They're just like in good shape,
Yeah.
good shape by all means, but they're not shredded. They're not in contest shape. I say, I've worked so hard the last 12 weeks. I've reduced my calories down to 500 per day. Therefore, I deserve these pizzas. I deserve these cakes and cookies and cupcakes. And I'm like, you wouldn't have had to have this such strong binge eating behavior if you just ate a proper diet.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have the urge to do it because you'd know how much better you feel. But the problem is with fitness people, influencers, bodybuilders is they are too scared to make the leap. They're too scared to make the jump. And it is very prevalent. It's not entirely their fault. There is a way that the companies market these products to make them seem so appealing, which, I mean, I used to be on that side of the fence. I used to understand, I think, I could really do with this. If I spent an extra 50p, I could go from this own brand protein bar to the super duper brand one. It would taste much better and it's got better branding. And it's got sprinkles in it and all this sort of rubbish. And I look back now and think, I've never eaten this food and felt better afterwards, ever.
No.
I felt quite good while eating it, but after the fact itself, the food does not make me feel better. So it's not producing a fit and healthy outcome, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Okay. So, if you were to, I guess, to educate, just to wrap things up, when it comes to the calories in, calories out, how would you, I guess, promote it to someone who's very new to this? Say you've got a client who asks you about how much calories I should be taking in. How would you educate them on, I guess, uh, long story short, how would you do it?
It starts from the advisor themselves or the coach themselves or the nutritionist or whoever's telling them to do. The problem with most industries is they will still talk about calories. So there'll be people just like me come on to my channel or Bart K's channel or your channel and they'll say, oh, I'm not eating much food at the moment. I'm only on 2,000 calories.
Yeah.
Then they'll still say and accept, oh yeah, the calories thing doesn't really work. So I'm like, why do you care on talking about it if it doesn't work? So what I do in all my clients' plans is I do not put calories anywhere. There's
Right.
never been the word calories on any plan that I've given anyone except to tell them to stop tracking calories. So
Yeah. So
this
you've
never
taken it out
happened.
the vernacular. You've taken it
I've
out the
taken it
vernacular.
out.
It's,
Exactly,
yeah.
yeah. So what I'm saying to them is, this is your food intake. If you can stick to these foods in these grammages each day, eat the fat of the pan, make sure it's raw or cooked depending on what it says listed there, do that. Eat that food. That's the food in your fridge that you eat the next day and the day after that. Then, of course, we change things after a while. But failing that, if you're out, then here are the macronutrient guidelines based on that food intake. So assuming they know how to track these things, the default setting is the food itself. Then it's the macronutrient intake, so the mass balance model, effectively. Then after that, I don't know what to tell them. It's not very accurate. So I just say, Just be sensible. Just eat a carnivore diet and try not to take the mick, basically. So that's kind of how I go about it. And of course, I show them the videos as well, so they're not too left in the dark.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. I do get a lot of people say, "Oh, I've been following your channel now for since you started, and I'm wondering how many calories you're on." And I'm like, "Have you? Have you been watching my channel?"
Obviously, we haven't been.
Well, obviously.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it makes me laugh a bit, but yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Education is key. And being a pioneer and being honest with people and saying things how they are and being a proponent of what you're trying to teach
Right.
is very important. So for people out there watching this that are influencers or nutritionists or whatever, if you're still talking about calories after this video, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Stop misinforming people is my word of wisdom.
Good on you. I agree with the same thing. And you know, yeah, from yeah, I guess from that point, once you've explained everything, you know, it's up to you. Take it with a grain of salt or do whatever you want to do. But at the end of the day, you are misinforming people. So just know that. Awesome stuff. Well, that wraps up pretty much everything, Jonathan, that I wanted to talk about. Thank you again for coming onto the channel. Appreciate your time and your wisdom and your thoughts around this. And yeah, so until next video, guys, see you next time.